Stacy Olney of LFA.org, also known as LFA ABA, and I am your tour guide on today's new concept. Today we are discussing ISPs for private schools. These are individualized service plans which apply to private schools. If you have your child in private school, or if you're even thinking about it and your child has a disability or special need, you need the information in this presentation. For all of this information, please know that you should check your local laws and regulations in your specific area and state, because there can be quite a bit of difference between areas for this information. I'm speaking from Southern California, and things may be different where you are. Also, I'm not perfect. If you find errors in any of my content, please contact me and let me know so that I can thank you and correct it. This presentation is brought to you by LFA Behavioral Consulting, working to bring about the joy to your family through individualized services guided by behavior analysis. We're also guided by transparency, compassion, partnership, and excellence. My contact information is here. I'm a board-certified behavior analyst. You can call me at 951-732-7257. Although it's a good idea to text me first, because I do get a lot of spam as a new business, so I might miss you if you just call me. You can also email me at stacy@ellafay, that's ELLAFAY, LFA, behavioralconsulting.org. And you can book a free 1-hour appointment with me at LFA.org. As I said, I'm a board-certified behavior analyst. I've been a board-certified behavior analyst since 2021. I have been a supervisor training people on the job to work with children since 2005, and I've been working with kids since 2003. So I think that you'll find my expertise helpful. I have experience in autism, ADHD, emotional and behavioral issues. I've worked in group homes, classrooms, after school, in-home, with children from 2 to 17. I've also done staff training, caregiver coaching, and support. Quick disclaimer, very, very important. The information shared in this webinar is intended for general educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for individualized behavioral or medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with your child's physician, behavioral health provider, or other qualified professionals regarding any medical, educational, or behavioral concerns. Do not delay or disregard seeking professional guidance based on information presented here. LFA Behavioral Consulting, LLC does not endorse any specific treatment plans or recommendations discussed in this presentation. The content is intended to support collaboration and informed discussion among medical, educational, and behavioral care teams, not to guide individual clinical decision-making. Because every child's needs and circumstances are unique, please speak with your care providers before implementing any strategies or suggestions in this webinar. So now let's get to the main meat, individualized service plans. What are they, and how can you take advantage of them? An ISP is a document which outlines the support a student with special needs receives when they're parentally placed in a private school. Unlike a Public Schools Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IEP, the ISP is not legally mandated, and its services are less comprehensive due to funding restrictions. So let me say that in a different way. If you go to a public school and your child has special needs, they usually get an IEP, or an individualized educational plan, right? That is a legal term and document and plan supported by the Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA. The ISP is not the same because it's not legally mandated, it's not under the same laws, and it's less comprehensive. The services are typically provided by the local public school district to ensure equitable services, and the plan is developed collaboratively by the school, the private school, and the parents. But it's not exactly a full IEP, and there's no guarantee of a free, appropriate public education, or FAPE. So who runs the ISP? The public school actually has oversight. The local public school district is responsible for creating and managing the ISP, because private schools are not required to provide special education services. So even though you're going to private school, your contact here is your local public school district. These are often called the local education agency. Maybe it's not a specifically your school district or you've got something weird going on. But anyway, the LEA is usually the public school district where you live. Where the private school is physically located, those are who handle the child find, identifying eligible services, evaluations, consultation, service provision, not the parent's resident district, unless they coincide, unless you're coming from the same area. Now, this can create confusion for cross-district families. So let's say you go to private school in one city, but your home is in another city. Parents often don't know which district to contact first. So there is a bit of a funding reality here in that ISPs usually are not eligible for the same level of services that you might see in a public school. So if your child previously had an IEP in a public school and now they're attending private school, you might be fine, but you might have less services than you did before. This is because LEAs must spend a proportionate share of their federal IDEA funds, that's Part B funds, on parentally placed private students. There's a formula that goes with this. It's like the number of eligible private schools kids with disabilities in the district are divided by the total kids with disabilities in the districts times the federal IDEA allocation. Funds are pooled across all the private schools within the local educational agency's boundaries, and services are decided annually via a timely and meaningful consultation between the LEA, private school representatives, and parents. No child has an individual right to services here. It is a group-based and first come, first served basis in many places. Some students get like robust pull-out therapy while others get nothing because funds have depleted. Only nonprofit private schools qualify. So if your child goes to a for-profit private school, they are excluded from these funds in most states. Now, how can LFA help? Many parents discover too late that the ISP services are minimal or unavailable. If you'd like, LFA can provide a gap analysis consultation to compare your child's prior IEP, if any, to likely ISP offerings and estimate a supplemental private needs. Like, what are you going to need to supplement in order to receive the same amount of services that your child was getting before? So, what kinds of services might you receive through an ISP? Well, they're going to be equitable services. A student is entitled to equitable services under the ISP, so they should be similar to, as much as possible, what you might receive from an IEP. An ISP may include accommodations like extended test times or assistive technology, and it will specify goals to monitor the child's progress and outline service providers and their frequency. Services could include like speech and language therapy, OT counseling, like reading intervention. These are often pull-out services, not necessarily delivered in the current private school. They usually occur on the public campus, so like after private school hours or perhaps bust during the day. Sometimes on private school grounds, right? If the LEA agrees and private school allows. So this is not always possible, but sometimes it is. Rarely are these integrated into the private school day. And transportation to the public site services are not required under IDEA, although some states do provide this. Providers have to meet the same standards as public school staff, except private school teachers delivering remedial services don't necessarily need a special ed certification. So let's look at some differences between the IEP and the ISP. First of all, legal versus voluntary. An IEP is a legally binding document that guarantees a free, appropriate public education. That's FAPE, FAPE, under IDEA. An ISP is not legally binding and is often offered as a courtesy. Service levels. Services under an ISP are often less frequent and less comprehensive than those provided through an IEP. Service delivery. ISP service may be provided at a public school site, while IEPs are provided within the student's public school setting. Dispute resolution. IEP has full due process rights. That's mediation, hearing, litigation, right? But an ISP has very limited. You can file a complaint to the state DOE only. There's no due process for the amount or location of services. When parents reject a public IEP and enroll privately, they generally lose reimbursement rights for private tuition unless they can prove the public program denied a free and public education or free and appropriate public education. So let's talk about the ISP content and development process. The first step to all of this is to make sure that you have the right LEA. The local education agency where the private school is physically located is the one who handles the child find process. That is identifying eligible students. They handle evaluations, consultation, and service provision, not the parent's resident district, unless, of course, these coincide. So you got to make sure you have the right agency. Often, this is as easy as making a couple phone calls. Next, you have to submit a written request for evaluation to that correct LEA, and they have to complete an evaluation in a timely manner, the same as public school kids with their IEPs. You submit for an IEP, you actually request one in writing. They respond to you within 2 weeks, at least where I am. It's about 2 weeks, I think 15 days. And then they have a certain amount of time to complete their assessment. And then there is a consultation phase. You have to attend, or at least ensure the private school representative attends the annual meetings deciding what services will be offered district-wide. And you have to actually do a ISP meeting. So that's, very similar to an IEP. You bring documentation. That is, if they had like a prior IEP, you might bring private evaluations, input from teacher, any documentation or information that would be useful in determining what services are appropriate for your child. You bring those to the meeting. And collaboratively, you decide together what your child needs. This is the local education agency, maybe the private school representative, and parents all working together. This is after eligibility has been determined. What is talked about in the plan, or what is set forth in the ISP, should include specific services that your child will receive, how frequently these services will be given, what location the services will be rendered at, the skill goals and behavioral goals that your child will be working towards, and progress monitoring. But this is far shorter and simpler than most IEPs. Parental consent is required in order to implement this. Parents can decline or accept partial services. Don't sign anything unless you are ready to accept it. And you can decline consent, of course. Again, no child has the individual right to services, right? It's group-based and first come, first served in many places. So again, some students will get lots of help and others will get nothing if the funds are depleted. This plan is reviewed annually, but there's not really a strict reevaluation timeline like you see in IEPs. So there are some pain points with ISPs. For instance, services are often off-site and kind of disruptive to your daily schedule. The minutes that you receive are far fewer than you may have received in a prior IEP. Logistics can be difficult. There's no stay put rights. And there are some very limited ways to fight back, right? Because it's not legally mandated. So the ISP process can be frustratingly opaque and under-resourced in most districts, which is why many private school parents feel abandoned by the public system. Now, LFA can be the bridge between overwhelmed parents and bureaucratic districts if you need help. So let's talk about next steps for you, right? Um, Before enrolling in a private school, if you haven't yet, you want to ask the LEA about their typical availability for services, right? Request a consultation meeting with someone from your local education agency where the private school is physically located. Often this can be online or over the phone. Ask for last year's proportionate share amount and how many kids typically receive services. So basically, you want to talk to them and get some idea about what is the likelihood that your child will receive the services that you're seeking. Um, Next, you want to make sure you get in everything in writing. Submit that written request for evaluation. You want to bring an advocate to the meeting if you're unsure about going. You've got to attend the uh, the annual meetings, right? You have to attend the ISP meeting. That's one where you bring all your documentation. You want to also plan to supplement privately. If you were previously receiving an IEP and you had a certain amount of services, you might not be able to get the same amount of services. So you might end up going through insurance or maybe privately funded services, out-of-pocket services in order to fill the gap of service that your student had before. Many families do pay out of pocket for therapy or accommodations where a private school doesn't provide. Now, if services are inadequate, you can file a state complaint. This is usually a fast process and no attorney is needed. But this is not often successful for getting more services, but it can force compliance. So you want to understand your options. Before enrolling in a private school, if possible, you have to understand what special education services are available through an ISP and consider if they will meet your child's needs. You also want to involve a public school official, if possible. Work with your local public school district. You can call them to have a conversation about your child's needs and the services available to them under an ISP. You also want to seek professional advice. It's often helpful to seek advice from a special needs advocate or a lawyer to ensure your child's rights and options in a private school setting. My advice to you is confirm your exact setup. You want to know the exact name of your PSP and confirm that your child is not dually enrolled in a public charter. I know that homeschool, charter, private school options can be diverse, and a lot of families have a mix of services that they received. So you have to fully understand exactly how your child's school setup is constructed, right? You have to know the trade-off. You can have maximum educational freedom and privacy, but in the trade-off for that is that you give up your full public special education rights. If you want a real IEP, you decide, this ISP stuff isn't going to be enough. I want my full services under FAPE. Then you're going to have to disenroll from the PSP and enroll in a public homeschool charter. In my area, this is like Springs or Mission Vista or Pivot or a traditional public school. The charter becomes the LEA and must provide a free and appropriate public education via an IEP, often with in-home or virtual services. Now, if you decide you want to stay in private school, you can request an evaluation from the district of residence now, but manage your expectations. Services will be minimal to non-existent. Many families fund private therapy, like through their insurance or the regional center or out of pocket instead. Now, if you're switching to a charter, do it mid-year if needed. The new charter has to offer an interim 30-day IEP. And beware of common misunderstandings. You really want to talk to as many people as you can. I personally suggest looking through Facebook groups and seeing if you can join one. Is look up those key terms that you see in this little webinar and look them up in the Facebook groups. There are so many people out there with so much information who are ready to help. And if you know anybody who needs this information, please share this webinar with them. Share the link. If you need to talk to me about anything that you've seen in this webinar or anything else involving your child's education or behavioral needs, please contact me. Thank you again for joining this webinar. That's pretty much all I have for you today. And again, you can reach me at LFA Behavioral Consulting. Stacy Only, 951-732-7257. Please text me first. You can also email me at stacy@lfabehavioralconsulting.org, and you can book a free hour with me at lfa.org. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.